Hello and welcome. I'm Ellie Richardson and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US Attorney General to testify amid bipartisan frustration over withheld Epstein documents, raising questions about the Justice Department's independence and alignment with Trump agenda. The Justice Department has unredacted names like billionaire Les Wexner, assistant Leslie Goff, and modelling agent Jean-Luc Brunel as Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators in a 2019 FBI document. NATO has said it has launched a new mission to strengthen its presence in the Arctic as part of an agreement to diffuse severe tensions within the alliance prompted by US President Donald Trump's desire for the US to acquire Greenland. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky emphasizes that the United States must understand that as long as Russia continues its aggressive actions and killings, there will be no sufficient trust in diplomacy. A mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, leaves 10 people dead, including the suspect, with over 25 injured in attacks at a high school and a nearby home. Police found 6 victims inside Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. Indonesia readies up to 8,000 troops for a board of peace efforts in Gaza. The troops will form part of an internationalist stabilization force under US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has called for a firm response from the US and the international community to Israel's West Bank plans. He says these actions hinder peace efforts and violate international law. The gunman who opened fire at Prathan Kiwat School in Hat Yai, Thailand, has been shot by the police. Over 3 people have been injured, with authorities are investigating the situation. And for your top story this hour, Denmark's Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen announced that his country will make a substantial contribution to NATO's newly launched Arctic mission, Arctic Sentry. The mission aims to address growing security concerns in the Arctic, a region increasingly important to NATO due to Russia's military activity and China's strategic interests. Poulsen emphasised that Denmark's contribution will ensure the Arctic remains a key focus in NATO's long-term plans and exercises. While specific details of Denmark's support are still being worked out, the country is committed to maintaining momentum in safeguarding the Arctic region. The mission comes amid long-standing concerns from US President Donald Trump regarding the geopolitical importance of Greenland, a Danish territory. We are now being joined by Major General retired Dr. Rajan Kulchar, who's an international relations expert joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Why is Denmark calling for a stronger NATO defence presence in Greenland and now the Arctic right now?
Thank you, Ali, because I need to understand, firstly, the geostrategic importance of the Arctic Ocean today, and especially after the global warming. At one time, Arctic Ocean was a no-go area. But over the years, due to the melting of ice, the Arctic Ocean has become accessible to major countries of the world, and especially the superpowers have shown a lot of interest in this region. And if I can name, because Russia has a strong military presence here, and Russia has been here for a number of years. The northern fleet of Russia, the submarines and the icebreakers, cordons, and its entire air defense machinery is here. and that poses a great security threat to America, because Alaska is not very far off from where Russian forces are located. The second aspect is the economic aspect. I think that is far larger importance to NATO right now, because there are vast hydrocarbon reserves in this area, and estimated 13% of the world's undiscovered oil, and 30% natural gas. And the emerging ship lanes, especially the northern sea route, if you see the northwest passage into the Atlantic Ocean, it's a major economic corridor today into this ocean, and they are critical seabed mineral deposits. And therefore, if you look at from this entire geostrategic perspective, there are two aspects why Denmark is now interested into this thing and wants to bring in the NATO presence. As you are aware, there are five countries which are bordering the Atlantic Ocean, and the Atlantic Council, you have eight countries. So Denmark is one of the five countries. And why Denmark is perturbed, or in the sense that Greenland is part of that Denmark boundary, it is because of the very strong Russian presence in this area, and possibly the NATO feels like a dwarf here. And therefore they want a collective NATO presence here. As you look at the Russians' predominance in this region, or I would say hegemony, and with China also coming in now, Chinese vessels also coming in now. And if you remember, when Putin visited India, he made an offer to the Indian Prime Minister that please come to the Arctic Ocean and do your research. So now that is what is perturbing these countries here, because there are vast amount of reserves, and everybody wants to share the spoils here. And that is why recent interest of President Donald Trump also in this area, and especially the Greenland episode, why Trump, in spite of having a space base here in Greenland, wants the entire Greenland to be part of the US. So the Russian threat is omnipresent here, because more than 30 submarines, 40 warships, it's a sizable force in the Arctic Ocean. So I feel both the factors are responsible for this.
And what kind of contribution is Denmark offering to this specific NATO mission, and how might it shape the alliance's Arctic strategy?
That's a very good question, because the Arctic strategy now is that Denmark wants, because Denmark has a very strategic presence in the Arctic Ocean. It's located in a place that it can you reinforce its self here, and it does not have its own resources here to project its maritime power. And therefore it is now suggesting, and it doesn't want too much of US interference. So I think that is also counter to the US efforts to come into Denmark. Now Denmark is interested that a NATO kind of a force comes here and establishes bases in Denmark, in Greenland, in all those areas. Norway is also part of this. And how these bases can develop into a potent maritime sea power to influence the one-sided balance in the Arctic Ocean now, because you see ultimately it is a balance of power in this region which possibly NATO does not have it, and it wants to reinforce its presence in this area.
Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere, as we will be back with you very shortly. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has announced that France will offer more humanitarian visas to Iranians seeking asylum following a crackdown by Iranian authorities on regime opponents. The visas will specifically target individuals persecuted by the Iranian government, including political dissidents. Minister Barrot also emphasised France's commitment to supporting the Iranian people amidst state-led repression. This move aligns with France's growing diplomatic pressure on Iran, including backing EU-wide sanctions against human rights violators. We are now being joined again by Major General retired Dr. Rajan Kuchar. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. What recent events in Iran have led France to expand humanitarian visas for Iranians seeking asylum?
You see, it's, I think, a very important message to Iran also. It's a strategic signaling also to Iran, because recently, if you're aware of the protests in Iran which have taken place, and more than, it is reportedly being said that more than 10,000 people have died, and a large number of people, are feeling insecure with this kind of regime in Iran. So, considering that, I think France has taken this step, and it has legal dimensions also, because humanitarian visas are a specific instrument under the French and the European Union laws that allow individuals who are facing a threat to life and freedom to enter and seek asylum. So it's not in the normal course the migrants or the immigrants are being allowed inside. It is on a specific reason, and I think this is a signal to Tehran. It is to a critique of the Iranian governance practices, and it also reinforces Western pressure on Iran regarding human rights abuses. So it aligns with a broader perspective of the EU, which has concerns over the civil liberties and the political repression in Iran. And a second important aspect is that this move of France could influence other members of the EU states also to adopt similar expansions of their humanitarian visa categories, and get this people in Iran a safe passage to the European countries, and it also gets into a larger actually narrative of human rights advocacy, regularity in innovation, and leadership issues. So I think the prime focus here is to send a strong strategic message to Iran and to the people of Iran, I think in particular, because they are trying to give an opportunity to the Iranians now that in case you feel insecure in your own country, you have a place or you have a second home available to us. And this also builds up a kind of a narrative of the Western nations that Iran is an unsafe place, and possibly in times to come, it will also look for a regime change in Iran.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan, for joining us here today on NewsX World. A person has been detained and later released in connection with the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, mother of NBC's Savannah Guthrie. Nancy, 84, was reported missing on February the 1st from her home in Arizona. The FBI had released disturbing footage of a masked man approaching her door on the night of her disappearance. The suspect, seen wearing gloves, a mask and carrying a backpack, tampered with the doorbell camera before disappearing. Authorities detained an individual for questioning, but after a search, the person was released. Ransom letters demanding payment have also been received by the Guthrie family. Savannah, along with her siblings, has pleaded for the public's help in finding their mother, who has health issues and requires regular medication. The FBI continues to investigate the situation. We are now being joined by Major General Sudhakar G, who's a senior geopolitical and strategic defence expert. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. In situations like this, the FBI released the video of the suspect in a mask, and it's obviously attracted lots of attention from the public. What challenges do investigators face in a search like this, including collecting reliable evidence, confirming leads, and handling public expectations?
Good evening, Ellie. If that question is meant for me, all I would say that the whole issue is revolving around the mother of the anchor, Nancy Guthrie, staying alone in a house, and to facilitate the investigation. My take on the whole issue is that the ecosystem of Inland Law Enforcement Agency and Homeland Security has to factor in these kind of challenges in future and take preventive measures so that lonely old ladies like Nancy Guthrie also doesn't get repeated in future. Second thing is communication. There has to be some kind of a communication with such kind of people in country like US. There are elderly people who stay alone in far-flung areas. US has got a well-established network of communication. I really don't know. Along with the communication, some kind of an alarm system has to be inbuilt. Now that the artificial intelligence has come in a big way, as also the robotics, the security system of every house where the elderly people are staying alone has to be looked into. They have to be connected into a national network so that early and preventive steps can be taken in order to prevent a recurrence of such kind of things in future. Last but not the least is that there has to be a conceptual indulgence of the think tank, people who apply themselves cerebrally, that if it has happened to a well-known personality, that of the TV anchor's mother, it could happen to any ordinary man also. There are people who are below this line of economic standard. So is there a case in point where the Constitution of America also looks into these kind of threats in future and takes preventive measure legally and constitutionally? Back to Ellie.
And as we know that the family have responded publicly to the disappearance in the latest development, what role does media coverage play in shaping the search and public engagement?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question that you have raised. Actually speaking, it is very difficult to map the lifestyle of every individual, every family, regardless of the countries wherever they are residing. When you are talking about the public engagement and the responsibility, I personally feel every such kind of challenge has to be looked at with a spectrum of short, medium, and long term. We are aware of the fact when you talk about in the reverse order, firstly the long term, you see America is going through the aging population challenges. With the aging population, there is way of life is different. There is a lot of freedom, autonomy, independence. Financial freedom is particularly very quite visible over there in America. So therefore, their lifestyle is totally different. The culture is different, and people live independently in this manner. But the public responsibility and the engagement that I feel, there is a requirement to actually revisit these kind of conceptual societal issues, and there is a requirement of getting back to the joint family system, not the nuclear family system. The joint family system will always cater for these kind of challenges if we actually look into it. And number 2 point is that perhaps the awareness level of the people, that is also the social media, use of social media, these kind of things will always be relevant to find be a solution provider to these kind of challenges in future. And last but not the least is that the lady, despite being so old, why was she staying alone? That is what the moot question is coming up. There may be a conspiracy behind all this. Such kind of a thing happening, challenging and asking for ransom. That means this could have been intercepted. It is not overnight it has happened. She must have been getting frequent calls or getting emails or social media platform messages. Why hadn't she gone to the police at the earliest opportunity, thereby enabling the police authorities to intervene much prior to this particular incident took place? So these are a couple of issues which are coming to our mind, and maybe the US Homeland Security or the internal law and order situation will do well by looking into all these aspects in the spectrum of short, medium and long term. As a nation, at the level of strategic level, at the regional and at the local level, and coming to the domestic unit, we need to look at the core issue so that these things can be avoided for challenges emerging in times ahead. Back to Ellie.
Thank you so much, Major General Sudhakaji, for joining us here today on NewsX World. In the US, the Federal Aviation Administration has lifted the closure of airspace over El Paso, Texas, after it was temporarily shut down. According to a US administration official, Mexican drug cartel drones entered US airspace but were countered by the American military. However, the FAA assured that there is no threat to commercial aviation and all flights will resume as normal. Congressionwoman Veronica Escobar, who represents El Paso, confirmed there was no immediate threat to the city or surrounding areas after federal aviation authorities implemented the airspace closure. Flights in and out of the city were halted for 1 day while the situation was assessed. However, authorities have stated there is no ongoing danger. Finland's President Alexander Stubb has stated that Finland will not become a nuclear power in the future. Speaking at a press conference in Helsinki, Stubb has emphasized that Finland is already involved in NATO's nuclear planning, but does not see the need for any drastic challenges to nuclear deterrence provided by the United States. Stubb has made it clear that Finland has no intention of developing its own nuclear weapons. Let's listen in to some of his statements.
Näet tällä hetkellä tarvetta sille, että Yhdysvaltain muodostama ydinasesuoja, siis pelote, että sitä lähdettäisiin radikaalisti muuttamaan. Mutta on varmasti tarpeen mukaista, että ydinasevaltiot kuten Ranska tai Britannia, siis Ranska ei riippuvainen Yhdysvalloista, Britannia riippuvainen Yhdysvalloista, kertovat oman näkemyksensä sille, millaista yhteistyötä voisi. Oma tulokulmani on selkeä. Me olemme osa Naton ydinasesuunnittelua, mutta me emme ole, emmekä tule tulevaisuudessa olemaan ydinase.
Moreover, the Finnish president has pointed out the importance of countries like France and Britain in shaping future nuclear cooperation, as both have different relationships with the US on this issue. Stubb has also highlighted that the world has been in turmoil since Russia's war of aggression, and that he believes this is particularly due to shifts in the US foreign policy. A recent court hearing in Moscow has brought Viktor Vasin into the spotlight, with the Russian FSB security service identifying him as a key suspect in the attempted murder of senior military intelligence general Vladimir Alexeyev. Alexeyev was shot multiple times inside a Moscow apartment building and was later hospitalized. His shooting is part of a troubling trend, with several high-ranking Russian military officials having been targeted during the country's ongoing military campaign in Ukraine. The assassination attempts on army figures have raised serious concerns about the safety and stability of Russia's military leadership amid the prolonged conflict. Russian authorities say that 2 carriers will fly tourists home from the island and then pause flights. The move comes as jet fuel supplies run critically low across Cuban airports. The Russian airlines affected, including Rossiya, part of the Aeroflot group, and Severny Velta, they will suspend their flights until the jet fuel shortage eases. Moreover, Cuba's aviation regulator has warned international carriers that fuel would not be available on the island starting this week. The shortage is expected to last for several weeks. Canadian airline services to Cuba have already been suspended as a result of the fuel crisis. Efforts are underway to repatriate thousands of travellers to Canada. The lack of jet fuel adds to a broader energy crunch on the island that has left airports unable to service flights. Normally, tourism, a crucial part of Cuba's economy, is being hit hard. Officials point to tightened US sanctions and disrupted oil supplies from Cuba's traditional partners as key factors behind the crisis. The situation is expected to disrupt regional air travel and could possibly force more carriers to adjust routes or halt services if fuel supplies do not improve. The International Olympic Committee has warned Ukrainian skeleton racer Vladislav Harachyshev that he could face disqualification if he wears his memory helmet during the Winter Olympics. The helmet, which features images of Ukrainian athletes and children killed since Russia's invasion in 2022, was banned by the IOC. However, Harachyshev, who wore it during training today, has been urged to reconsider. While political statements are not allowed in competition, the IOC has suggested alternatives, such as wearing a black armband to express his grief. Furthermore, Harachyshev has insisted that he will wear the helmet, calling the situation theatre of the absurd. Meanwhile, the IOC is continuing efforts to convince him to comply with the rules. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.